Hello, pre-cal. This is Notes Lesson 2.1. We're looking at some quadratic functions now. We're working on quadratics and polynomial functions now. And so today we're going to be talking about the maximum and minimum of a quadratic function. We're going to be able to find the axis of symmetry, the vertex, and identify x and y intercepts of a quadratic function. You have two IXL skills. Again, they are pretty easy and should go pretty quickly for you, especially if you have a calculator. So make sure you have those calculators handy. So some warm-up information here. This is the standard form. Oh, actually, I'm going to call it general form. I always think general form is where we have all of our ducks in a row, A, B, C, ducks in a row. So we have ax squared plus bx plus c. And of course, the a and the b and the c are any number. So it could be like 2x squared plus pi x plus radical 2. That would be an example, a weird example of a quadratic function. So this is general form of a quadratic. And I hope that you know that anything that has the shape x squared, so that highest power really tells us the most information. Anything with an x squared has that shape of a parabola, which is that U shape. Now, if the a is greater than 0, so in this case, the a was 2, so that is greater than 0. So we have a parabola that is opens upward. And if the a value is less than 2, so it was like a negative 2, then that parabola would open downward. And that's really important right off the bat. You can just tell if a parabola opens up or down based on whether that value in front of the x squared is positive or negative. Every parabola has an axis of symmetry. So I'm going to go ahead and just sketch a little parabola, standard parabola. It has an axis of symmetry that goes right through the center of the parabola, and this one is not symmetric. I drew it by hand. So this is what's called the axis of symmetry. If it were symmetric, then you would be able to fold the parabola in half, and one side would fold onto itself. So it has built-in symmetry, which is kind of nice. And we can figure out the axis of symmetry using this magical formula. X equals negative b over 2a. And that is the equation of the axis of symmetry. So this formula, negative b over 2a, we're going to see all the time. You probably recognize it from the quadratic formula. X equals the opposite of b plus or minus blah, 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 all over 2a. So this is part of the quadratic formula. Kind of interesting. So we're going to use the opposite of b over 2 times a to help us figure out the axis of symmetry. The nice thing is, if you know the axis of symmetry, then we can also figure out the vertex. Every parabola also has a vertex. In this case, the vertex is right here. And in this case, it happens to be the minimum. We can figure out the vertex. It's an ordered pair. And the x-coordinate matches the axis of symmetry. And then if we want the y-coordinate, all we have to do is plug this value back into our equation for x and figure out what the output is. So a parabola has a quadratic function. This is the parabola shape. Has a vertex. In this case, it's a minimum. If our parabola was the other direction, then the vertex would be a maximum value, which makes sense because it is the highest point on that parabola, okay? And we can always find intercepts by plugging in zeros. That is, anytime something asks for an intercept, go ahead and just plug in a 0. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Okay. Again, if you needed to rewind and pause the video to copy that stuff down, please do. All right, example 1, find the maximum or minimum value of the function. Find the maximum or minimum value of the function. So here, some of the questions just give you a really nice graph. And so you see we have a lovely little sketch of the function here. Boy, I need to focus a little. Right. Okay. And when we look at this, we see we have an upward parabola. So I know this parabola happens to have an a value greater than 0. That's not important, but it's good to think about. And the minimum is the lowest point on the graph, which is right here, also known as the vertex. And they want to know what is the minimum value of the function. Whenever they talk about a function value, in this case, they want to know the y value. Okay, so the vertex, in this case, happens to be a minimum. And the vertex is at 2, -7. The minimum value of the function is -7, and that's what they're interested in. This is the function value. The y value is the function value, and this is where it occurs at. Okay, so sometimes they're going to ask you for the vertex, and sometimes, by the way, that says occurs. I don't know what letter that was that I drew. And sometimes they'll just ask you for the function value. So pay attention to the wording. Occurs at x equals 2, but the function, the minimum value of the function, the lowest output value is -7. Looking at this graph, we can also highlight a couple of other things. We want to know, hey, where are the x-intercepts? Well, x-intercepts always occur where the graph crosses the x-axis. So here we have an x-intercept, and I don't know exactly what that is. It looks like 4.50 maybe. I'm estimating there. And here we have another x-intercept. Looks like maybe negative, I don't know, -0.80 is another x-intercept. We could estimate those things, but it's good to know. You'll notice for x-intercepts, the y value is 0. That's how you find an x-intercept. You plug in 0 for y. The y-intercept, where our curve crosses the y-axis, looks to be about right here. So this is the y-intercept, and its ordered pair is 0, -3. If you want to find a y-intercept, you plug in a 0 for x. So these are all things that we want to be able to identify. I can also identify the equation of the axis of symmetry. The equation of the axis of symmetry here is always passes through the vertex. So the axis of symmetry is this vertical line, and yes, it'll always be a vertical line, where if you fold the parabola in half, it would lay on top of itself, okay? And the equation of this line, the equation of a vertical line, x equals 2 in this case. It's always the x coordinate of the vertex, okay? All good things to know and be able to look at a graph and identify, absolutely. Now we want to find the minimum value or the maximum value of the function. And here they gave us the equation of the function. So first of all, when I look at this, I know that it's a shape here that's x squared, so I know it's a parabola. And I want to know, is it an up parabola or a down parabola? That's right, the a value, -3, is less than 0. So we know it's a downward parabola. And so it looks something like this. So the question is, does this equation, does this function have a maximum or a minimum value? Well, if it's a downward facing parabola, then it must have a maximum value. Now, that maximum value is going to occur at the vertex. So we want to go ahead and figure out the vertex. So to find the vertex, we want to find the x coordinate, and that's going to be, we can use the formula -b over 2a. Well, I don't know if you can hear my kid, but being really loud. All right, so our general form for a function is ax squared plus bx plus c. You'll notice the c value here is 0. Our b happens to be 9. And the a is -3. All right, so we can plug that in. This says the opposite of b. We have a +9. The opposite of b is -9 over 2 times a. The a value is -3. So this is -9 over -6, and we can reduce that. We can divide by 3, so we get 3 over 2 for the x value. That's the x value. Now, if I want the y value, then I need to evaluate my function at that x value. So I'm going to take my function and I'm going to plug in 3 over 2. -3, in place of x, I'm plugging in 3 over 2 and I'm squaring it, plus 9 times 3 over 2. Now, the good news is if you don't like fractions, awesome. You have a calculator. So I'm going to go ahead and plug this in using my calculator. -3 parentheses 3 divided by 2 squared plus 9 parentheses 3 divided by 2. And if you plug it in with parentheses, we get some crazy decimal, 6.75. Well, that's not that crazy, but you can math frac it because they will not want any decimal answers here. So go ahead and math, convert to a fraction, and we get it's equals, it's not approximate, 27/4. Okay, so the y value is 27/4. So if we were to graph this, we would have this downward facing parabola that has a vertex right here at the ordered pair 3 over 2, which is 1.5. And 27/4, which is 6.75. Those are actually exact answers, so your computer program should accept it, but I don't actually know what it'll ask for. It only wants the function value. It does not want the vertex. So the maximum value is that y coordinate. So this is the maximum value. Y equals 27/4. Okay. So that's what they're asking for. You'd want to make sure that you're answering the question that is asked. All right. So to find the vertex, we use our lovely little formula, -b over 2a. That gives you the x value, and you just plug it back in to figure out the corresponding y value. Okay. We're going to get some more practice with that. Here we go. Example 2. Answer questions about the characteristics of the quadratic function. So again, I have a lovely picture of a graph here, and we want to answer these pretty basic questions. What is the y-intercept? So again, looking at this graph, where does it cross the y-axis? Well, here's our y-axis, and the y-axis and our blue graph intersect at 0, 0. Okay. What are the x-intercepts? Well, hey, this one happens to be an x-intercept also. It's a 2-for-1. 0, 0 is one of the x-intercepts, and right there, 4, 0. Okay. What is the equation of the axis of symmetry? Well, I can draw in the axis of symmetry. The axis of symmetry always passes through the vertex. So right here, this dotted line is that axis of symmetry. You can see how it sort of just cuts that parabola right in half. And it's a vertical line, and it's passing through 2 on the x-axis. So the equation is x equals 2. X equals a number is always a vertical line. Okay. And what is the vertex? Well, the vertex is the, in this case, maximum. And that vertex ordered pair is 2, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the vertex is 2, 8. So again, just characteristics that you want to be able to identify on every parabola. All right, so first here we want to find that axis of symmetry. And it's an equation, so it needs to have the equal sign. If you just wrote 2, that is incorrect. The equation means that there must be an equal sign. So x equals 2 is an equation. 2 is a point. It's not, 2 is a value. It's not an equation. Okay, so we want to find the equation of the axis of symmetry. Uses the formula x equals negative b over 2a. All right, so we have the a value here is 1. We have our b value of negative 5. And in this case, our c value is negative 5/2. We didn't need that though. So we want the opposite of b. The opposite of b is positive 5 over 2 times the a value. Now, it's important we understand that the a is the number in front of x. It is not x. X is a variable. We want the numbers in front. All right, so we get 5/2. And so the equation you would type in for IXL is x equals 5/2. If you put 5/2, that would be wrong. You have to have the whole equation. Okay, if you just put equals 5/2, that is not an equation. That's unbalanced. It doesn't have two sides. That doesn't have a left and a right side. Okay. All right, and C, find the coordinates for the vertex. No decimals. Read the fine print on IXL. Be very careful. All right, we have the A value of 1. We have a B value of negative 3 and a C value here of negative 11/2. We want to find the coordinates of the vertex. So we're looking for an ordered pair, an x and a y value. And so if I want to find the x, I get to use my lovely little opposite of b over 2a equation. All right, so we want the opposite of b. The opposite of b is positive 3 over 2 times 1. So we get 3 over 2. That is the x coordinate. Now, how do you find the y coordinate? You have a value for x, plug it back in. So for the y coordinate, we have plugging in for x, 3/2 squared minus 3 times 3/2 minus 11/2. Now you have a calculator, so use it. I'm going to use the Casio this time. Good, all right. And again, be careful with your parentheses, but I have it written perfectly. If you have it written perfectly, when you type it into your calculator, it'll also be perfect. 3 divided by 2 squared minus 3 quantity, 3 divided by 2, minus, I'm going to go ahead and put 11 over 2 in parentheses as well. So we get, again, negative 7.75, but they didn't want any decimals. I think on the IXL it said reduced fractions. So we can convert. So math frac it. Or if you have the Casio, you can have the FD or SD button. And we see that it equals negative 31/4. So fraction to decimal or math frac. So we get the y value of negative 31/4. This is all great stuff. Really easy to do on using your calculator. So don't be scared of decimals for sure. All right, is this a maximum or a minimum vertex? I know that the a value is greater than 0, so I know that it's an upward parabola, which means my vertex is a minimum. Okay. Very important. All right, that's it, ladies and gentlemen. How easy was that? So C1 and C2, have fun.